Hello again. It's Kevin from Storytellers Union, continuing to talk about the best records of 2023. It's the third video in the series. If you missed the first two, still here on our channel. But in this one, we are starting with number 20, going all the way to number 11. Wasting no time at number 20, Being Dead, When Horses Would Run. It's always exciting for me when I get to discover a new band. It doesn't happen as often as it used to, but that's what happened with Being Dead. They're new to me. It's their debut, and they're really something out of a Quentin Tarantino fever dream. And if you listen to it, you'll know exactly what I mean. They have to be destined to be featured in a Tarantino film somewhere down the line. You'll know that as soon as you hear this mix of surf rock with a 60s garage feel. There's some Americana in there. There's these childlike vocal harmonies. It's definitely a do-it-yourself feel. It's a rowdy energy and one of the more fun records that you are going to hear in all of 2023. Being Dead, When Horses Would Run, a band to keep your eyes on. Opposite end of the spectrum here at number 19, a band that has been around a while, and that's Lucero. You could say, though, that Lucero have returned to form with Should Have Learned By Now, because this sounds more like the albums that they had at the beginning of their career. They've had a couple of really theme-heavy records these last couple of outings, and they've been good, but this brings back the fun, I guess you would say. Should Have Learned By Now. You'll know this from the opening track. One Last FU makes it very clear that the Rowdy Rockers have remembered their roots. Their sound is rooted in Memphis soul. There's some Springsteen in there. It's alternative country, sort of a cowpunk sound at times. Lucero knows how to bring it, and bring it they do on the number 19 album of the year, Should Have Learned By Now. At number 18, we have yet another artist that is new to me. And again, this find excites me because of the way that I found it. Probably the most obscure album, I would say, in my top 30. But definitely, if you've not heard of Dean Johnson, it's something that I think that is worth your attention. I had a chance reading of an article about him. He is a Seattle-based folk singer, has been kicking around that scene for a couple of decades now, and it's taken 20 years to get to this, his debut. So just knowing how long it took to get to what is only a 29-minute album after 20 years of toiling, it piqued my interest enough. I checked it out, and as soon as I heard the opening track, I knew I'd found a gem. That opening track, Faraway Skies, sets a very high bar. It opens up like it's a Western, really. I mean, this is a modern take on Western cowboy music. There's some country stylings, of course, in that. You'll hear that Dean has a very angelic voice. It's quite haunting. There are times when, if you squint in the right way while you're listening, you sort of feel some James Taylor vibes perhaps going on. The total package here, though, is 29 very strong minutes, and the hope, at least for me, that it does not take 20 more years for Dean Johnson to have a follow-up. Number 17, Local Natives, Time Will Wait for No One. Beautiful harmonies, sophisticated arrangements. It's always been present in Local Natives music. It defines the music here on Time Will Wait for No One as well. But it also has a bit of an evolution for Local Natives, and it's a welcome twist on the formula for them. They've added a bit more soul and indie rock into what really has been more of a 70s Southern California sound that they've mined for much of their careers. That mix works very, very well here. Occasionally, those harmonies in this more indie soul setting will put you in the mind of Fleet Foxes, or at times the music will even get a bit of a Radiohead vibe to it. If those are bands that you enjoy, you'll definitely enjoy checking out the latest from Local Natives. I think that this is the one record you could put on if you're having a party and you've invited both your indie rock friends as well as your pop friends. I think they both would find something to enjoy with Local Natives. Time Will Wait for No One. Number 17. Moving on to number 16, Bully, Lucky for You. So up until now, this is Bully's fourth album. Up until now, Alicia Bognanno has been the leader, without question. She is the driving force of Bully. Here on Lucky for You, Bognanno becomes basically a solo act. And there's nothing really lost here by her going it alone. In fact, I would argue that this is perhaps Bully's best album yet. Bognanno's guitar tone still remains menacing, punishing. And then, of course, there's still that voice of hers where she actually just contains one of the best primal screams in all of rock music. Fans of 1990s grunge, I think, would appreciate this. It's certainly the grungy call to arms, but there's these big pop choruses that just jump out of all this heaviness, and it makes for a really unique listen. And it also makes for my number 16 album of the year, Bully's Lucky for You. Number 15, Gorillaz, Cracker Island. So if you watched the previous video in this series, you heard me sort of spoil the fact that I was not done talking about Damon Albarn. And here he is again with his second appearance on my list. He was at number 23, of course, with Blur's album, The Ballad of Darren. And if The Ballad of Darren is that beautiful, melancholy Sunday afternoon record, then Cracker Island is the party from the night before. As has been the case since the band's inception, Gorillaz fills Cracker Island with a ton of very notable guest appearances. The legendary Stevie Nicks has a great duet on here. Their memorable turns by Beck and Tame Impala. We even get a show-stealing moment from maybe the least likely person here, and that is the Bad Bunny, the international pop and rap star. Bad Bunny has a wonderful song on here that'll get you moving, and that really is what Cracker Island is all about, is to get you moving. But despite all these guests, they don't really steal the show, which in the last few Gorillaz records, it could be argued that the guest list got so heavy that it led for an unfocused listen. Here, Damon Albarn does not get overwhelmed by the guests. He is still front and center. It makes it one of the more streamlined Gorillaz albums in some time. It's definitely their most accessible album, in my opinion, despite the fact that they continue to go through genres and styles. There's a through line here that makes a very consistent listen, one of the better ones in Gorillaz repertoire, and my number 15 album of the year. Clocking in at number 14, we have Wilco with Cousin. Now, last year, Wilco released what was my album of the year with the brilliant sprawl of the genre exercise, Cruel Country. It was actually my favorite Wilco album in more than 20 years, and they're one of my favorite bands, so that says a lot. Going to be hard to follow that up, but they do so with a very strong record that takes a very different turn than what we heard on Cruel Country. In fact, here, the trick that they pull is bringing in a producer from the outside. The first thing that they have not self-produced in 15 years, and it is to this album's benefit. They bring in Welsh musician Kate LeBon to produce, and she pulls out of the guys a more experimental sound. And sometimes harkens back to the early, well, I wouldn't say the first album, but definitely the second, third, and fourth albums in Wilco's catalog where they got more experimental. There's a bit of that embracing of the experimental side. It doesn't completely get out of the mid-tempo range, so that's still a bit of the more modern day and mature Wilco, but it is mixed with some of the elements that will recall some of the highlights of their youth. In fact, I think the thing that is strongest about Cruel Country is the way that without really repeating themselves, you can hear highlights and sounds from across the entire repertoire of Wilco. I think Kate made a point to make Wilco sound like Wilco while also pushing them forward to do some things that maybe they had not done before, or at least in a while. It's obvious that that you could embrace the narrative of, well, they've done this pretty straightforward country album that sounds very live and one take with all the focus on songwriting and harmony, and that this is somehow a correction, but it's really not quite that simple, especially when you learn the fact that Cousin was actually recorded mostly before Cruel Country, and they stopped production on it when Cruel Country's inspiration caused them to keep chasing that album until its completion. They returned to Cousin and finished it. So it's obvious that they can still work in two modes at the same time, and it makes it kind of exciting to see where they go from here. My hope is they bring back Kate and see where all else she can push the band to go. Wilco, number 14. Moving on to number 13, we have Kentucky's own Tyler Childers, who, in my mind, has returned to form here. And when I say return to form, that is because last year saw the release of Can I Take My Hounds to Heaven, which, while I liked, it was a very ambitious triple album that was a bit divisive to some, just because there was some fat on the record. As much as I liked it, it was a single album done three times, and that is to say that it's the same songs on three of different discs, done in different arrangements and styles. And maybe that was a bit too much. I appreciate that ambition, but it is definitely at least one disc too long, and many could argue that it was actually two discs too long. This time, what Tyler has done is come right back with a very svelte 27-minute album that clocks in at only 7 tracks, one of which is a cover, a great one though, of Chris Christopherson's Help Me Make It Through the Night. Rustin' in the Rain has this short running time that I think actually is to its benefit, only because it has that real 60s and 70s country album, classic album. Feels like one of those lost classics that you might stumble over in a dollar bin at your local record store or something along those lines. Probably what he was going for, and with that he definitely succeeds. From the galloping title track that kicks off the record all the way through to Time and Space that ends it, which Time and Space is one of my favorite songs of the year, and I think one of Childers' best ballads now. Rustin' in the Rain is prime country, prime Tyler. If the worst thing you can say about it as far as complaining is that it is too short, then that just speaks to the quality of what is there. Leave them wanting more. Number 12, The Hives, The Death of Randy Fitzsimmons. Speaking of albums that are clocking in at only 30 minutes, here's another one. It also revels in its brevity, and I think is better for it. But first, before we really get into that, you might be wondering, who is Randy Fitzsimmons that they are eulogizing in this title? In Hives lore, Fitzsimmons is the Svengali who discovered them, put them together as a boy band. In fact, they say that he plucked them out of obscurity when they were only adolescents and put them together. He writes all their songs and made all their hits. Unfortunately, following the release of their last album, Fitzsimmons passed away, which is why the band pretty much took a break, disbanded after 2011. But they had some lingering questions about Fitzsimmons' death, so they had his grave excavated, and what they found was no body. Instead, the coffin was full of lyrics and music that would make up the current album, The Death of Randy Fitzsimmons. Now, if that sounds like hogwash, it's because it is. It's all fictional, but it's a way better story than the actual reason for the 12-year hiatus between Hive's records, and that was health issues amongst the band. But that tongue in cheek and warped humor that is their backstory is also evident once again in the Hive's music, which has always kind of been their calling card. They've not lost a step nor changed a thing about their approach, and this is a good thing for the fans of the group's relentless style. They barely take a breath through this fun half hour it takes to run through the death of Randy Fitzsimmons. But definitely worth a listen. Number 12, The Hive's Death of Randy Fitzsimmons. Rounding it up, for today's countdown, we'll end with number 11, and that is the Lemon Twins, Everything Harmony. The Lemon Twins have always been retro. They've always taken liberally from the 1970s. But this time around, they're looking at a different side of the 1970s. They've always been known for their electric guitars, the glam rock sound, but here we're trading in those electrics for acoustics, and it usually clocks way closer to like Simon and Garfunkel than say T-Rex. The band is fronted by a pair of brothers, Brian and Michael D'Adrio, and this time around they do still rock, but they bring more of that soft rock, and I think actually it is a great development for them because I've loved them from the jump, and every album has been a different sort of retro feel, but it has always been done a little tongue in cheek, as if they, that smirk is if they know that it's a bit much. But this time they play it very straight, and I think that it really is to the benefit of the album. Everything Harmony is a perfect title because those harmonies that have always been sort of, I think the strength of this band is really front and center in these softer rock arrangements. There are times that you're going to hear things that are put you in the mind of Wings, maybe also sometimes, like I said earlier, Simon and Garfunkel. When they do rock it up a little bit more, it does lean less towards glam and more towards like a big star sound. So they are hitting all the touch points of the 1970s, and what they've produced is an album that is meticulously arranged. I think it's one of the better sounding albums of 2023. Put it on headphones and you'll hear it for yourself that every tiny note in every instrument is very well considered, very well put together. It makes for this focus that they have brought and this more serious approach that they brought to Everything Harmony is made for one of the more beautiful albums of 2023. And number 11 on my list, the Lemon Twins, the Lemon Twigs, Everything Harmony. And with that, we have 10 more down, 10 more still to go. I hope that you join us next time, and we'll finish this countdown starting at number 10, going all the way to my album of the year. Thank you very much. See you then.